I'm going to read, since there's two of you, I'm going to read Aspen's first and then Cameron's. So, alphabetical. Aspen Decker is an enrolled member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, Tatuayakan, Flispa, and Kasanka, and a speaker of her tribal language and Salish language. She graduated with a master's degree in linguistics from the University of Montana and earned a bachelor's degree in tribal historic preservation from Salish Kootenai College. She has Montana Class 7, Native American Language and Cultural Educator license, and has taught Salish for many years. She was raised learning traditional Salish arts such as beadwork, regalia making, basket weaving, which she still practices. She is also interested in and works with graphic arts incorporating Plains ledger art style and pictographic imagery to highlight important aspects of Salish culture. And then also Cameron is Diné, an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation and a descendant of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. He is fascinated with printmaking, painting, drawing, digital art, and public art. He served as faculty member at Salish Kootenai College in the Fine Arts Department, serving as program chair in the department for 4 years. Cameron recently worked at the Missoula Art Museum as an Educator and Outreach Coordinator. He holds an MA in Fine Arts and Integrated Arts in Education. He is now co-owner of Xว์lxświlt, together with his partner, Aspen Decker. They focus on ways to support our Montana schools and institutions with authentic, appropriate, and engaging lessons about Indigenous values, contributions, and innovation. So, welcome, Aspen and Cameron Decker.
Hello everyone, again my name is Aspen Decker, and I said I am Berut Salish Ayakan. I am Kootenai, Kalispel, and Blackfeet. And I said today, I'm going to be talking about my art. So, Sept in Salish means doing something good with your hands. So, Sept is like good work, you know? And this place that we're in is called the place of the small bull trout. And so a lot of our art is based on our Salish culture and language, seasonal round. And so it really goes beyond just a place-based art residency. I mean, like, we're thinking about like the library, but you know, it goes back thousands of years for us because our people have been in this area. This is Salish Aboriginal territory. So when I'm thinking about place-based, I'm thinking about the Sept, that bitterroot that still grows here. In some places, like more so like up on the L, Septiman, I forgot what that's called, is it Mount Jumbo? And I always forget the like Suyapi names for things, but up there, I know that there's some growing there and a few other sites, but there's been so much development. And so I'll be kind of talking about that as we move forward. But yeah, I try to use a lot of traditional knowledge and art and mix it in with a more contemporary cultural adaptation. And now, so I'll let Cameron question before I keep going.
Cameron Decker, Louis Gus, Jaune Quick-to-See Smith. I said, good day everybody, my name is Cameron, and I make things with our company, Xว์lxświlt, with my wife, Aspen. And I'm grateful for today, and grateful to get to come present and talk about this sort of crazy week and a half or so that we've had of just beginning our residency and the projects that we're working on. Aspen did a great job of just describing kind of our motivations and what we're thinking about as we're working on these really different projects. And I'll show this picture here. This is us here. We work together in this company that we formed, just getting to really continue work that we've done our whole lives, I guess, and especially Aspen, but we sort of took our two forces of language and arts and put them together, and have been trying to serve schools and institutions and, you know, collaborate with people that I think, you know, that where there's a need for thinking about this place and what's here, and it's been really exciting work. So we've been really lucky to be able to work together on not only just our projects in schools, but now getting to be artists, like really get to go chase our dreams as artists and be artists, and which we've always done, sort of lots of late nights, and, you know, time where we wish we'd have more time to focus on making, and now we're getting to do that, which is really great. And this is our family here on the side, our 4 kids, and they keep us pretty busy too, thus the late nights, usually, or, you know, most of the time they're joined in with us on a lot of things, but we have our time together, and then we have this time with our family that really motivates a lot of what we're doing too, and so we're just excited to share some of that. Aspen's going to talk about the work that she's developing and her ledger art, and I'll talk a little bit about just some of the scanning and the things that I've been really interested in with the 3D printer and the engraving machines. So I'll let you take it over.
Yeah. So I guess first I should kind of get into like a little more of who I am, because I feel like a lot of art is inspired by like my upbringing and just you know, my community. And so since I am from the and Salish and Kootenai tribes, you know, our reservation was established later on, but we had this huge Salish Aboriginal territory that spanned from, you know, down in the Bitterroot Valley all the way down into Yellowstone, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and up into Canada. Like, that's where Salesian peoples were. And for our particular dialect and our Sedlish band, we went all the way into Washington, and sometimes, like, I've heard of them like going all the way up to like Canada area. But for the most part, you know, we used the rivers, and we had a big canoe culture, and that was the way that we were able to go up into Washington and go do like our salmon runs in Kettle Falls. And so we would meet up with these other Salesian bands, and then there was also all of the local indigenous tribes that, you know, we had a lot of relationships with them, where we would, you know, get together throughout the year, and one of them is like the Nez Perce. And so I'm also Nez Perce, I guess I forgot to mention that. My great-grandpa was Nez Perce, but there's a lot of that intermixed Nez Perce blood within my community, because they were just over the hill, you know, in Idaho, and so they came to the Bitterroot Valley, and then we would all like go over to hunt our bison. So there's just so much history and indigenous knowledge that, you know, it dates so far back, and, you know, from these reservations, there's been a lot of assimilation and genocide and ethnocide, you know, against our people. So going through these hardships, we always try to continue to at least perpetuate and keep that knowledge going. So even though we've been in these dispositions and being moved onto the reservation, you know, one of the things that we try to do is go back to those Aboriginal sites, those Salish place names, and a lot of those Salish names usually tell what we did in these certain locations. And so some of them might be like Xʷlxʷilt, it has camas, and you know, there's like different fish names, like the place of the small bull trout for here in Missoula. You know, that could kind of tell you that were we fishing, you know, in this like confluence by the Rattlesnake, or did we go down to Bonner, which is the night, the place of the bull trout, so like bigger bull trout. So, you know, like it kind of helped us to guide us, I guess, in a way that, the way that we moved throughout the seasons, we knew that, oh, once we get to this site, we have like our camp here, and this is the time to go and gather a certain native plant. And so all these families and everyone within our tribe, we each had our own specific role. And so there was astronomers, the medicine people who were like the doctors, and, you know, everyone had a certain role that they had to play in order to make sure that we could sustain our huge tribe. And so making sure that there was enough gathering of certain native plants, hunting of bison and these different big games, we had this very cohesive seasonal round. But now that we're on the reservation, 150 years later, we now live, in our contemporary state instead of our Skaimu. And things have changed, but yet we try our best to keep that tradition going. So going back to certain sites, we're able to still interact in the same way that our ancestors did. But yet there's also all of this development, like here in Missoula. So a lot of those sites that we knew of that had, teepee rings and different sites, they're now developed. So over by like the Crackle Barrel, there's so much development there just in the last 2 years. And so I don't even think that there's maybe any of that left. Or at least, I don't know if we should be snooping around in all these developed areas of what are you guys doing out here? But yeah, so one of the things that, I guess back to my upbringing, I was raised around my elders, my family, who taught me, how to do these seasonal gatherings, how to go to certain sites. And because it's that intergenerational knowledge transfer, there's a lot on us now as parents to be able to share that with our children. So, I really try my best to keep the language along with the culture because it's so important. And along with that is art. I feel like any of our belongings, which Suyapis call artifacts, it's all an art form within our community. So even though it seems like it's just this utilitarian object that we use for gathering native plants, a lot of times there's this whole making process and just the effort to get out to these certain sites and make these things. You're stitching it, and there's a whole unique way to do it, and the protocol that goes along with it, and certain shapes that these baskets make. I feel like that's been a big part of my identity growing up. So even if it's not just all these writing and painting and typical art forms, I feel like I've always been around art because I've been in beading, involved with regalia making and all these different belongings that I feel like it's helped me grow as an artist today too, because I'm reflecting on, well, what is the traditional way to do this? What are the traditional materials? And now we're thinking about how to adapt that. But yeah, I guess going to my picture over here, this is some of the bark baskets that I made. So there's a lot of the cedar bark baskets, and then there's some aspen tree, river birch, and paper birch baskets that I made just a couple years ago. And I put some floral designs on that. And yeah, that was one of the more old school ways of doing our bark baskets. But now we're trying to be a little more inventive with actually putting these designs through, what's that machine called? Sorry, the laser engraver. So we took my camas flower and we put it on this ost. And just thinking about the way that it used to be made, it had to all be made by hand and carving a lot of the times. It was made with carving and maybe some pitch glue and different native paints that we're able to put on here. But now we have all this new technology, and it's a way to just get our designs on it just nice and crisp. And so I've been really enjoying using that laser engraver. And yeah, this is my ledger art, and I have actually more pictures of that. Just up here. Oh, I guess the ledger is always down, but this is another tool that I made, and so this is a Xʷlxʷilt, a bison horn, and what this is used for, historically, traditionally, is when you're up on a horse. So war parties, there was somebody who was the water boy, and that was kind of their role within the war party. So they're kind of moving up, with their roles until they become these good hunters, these good warriors. But having this water cup to Xʷlxʷilt, when you're up on the horse, it has this long string, and so they're able to drop it, and it goes right into the river, and it has a hole off to the side. So when it hits that water, it fills up, and then they're able to just pull it up while they're like still on their horse. And then they had to give every person in the war party a drink of water, spill it out. If they didn't drink it all, get the next one. So I recreated that. Mootlumen is our word for it, mootlumen. And so that has that onomatopoeia, the sound of the word. So when it's filling up, that sound, mootlumen, mootlumen. That's our word for these like corn drinks and our corn cups. And what I did, it's really hard to see, I think. I put the XʷlxWilt, a coyote story about the XʷlxWilt, the bison and coyote around it. So it has this like spiral of the story, starting at the top, and it goes all the way down. But I thought this was a good way to keep that oral tradition going, as well as like the pictographic art. So trying to use also that like basic traditional forms that we noticed in pictographic art and petroglyphs. No, it's in that right. You know, like the way that they designed it and the things that we see even locally in some of these sites. So it was a very simple form of art that I put on here, and I did a wood burning of it. And so this antler is actually a lot of hair particles that harden. And so when I was burning it, it smells like burnt hair. But that was pretty cool to be able to make this, and then we, use it as a teaching tool for our children too. Is like, being able to tell that coyote story, let them, feel this, see this cup, and twist it, and follow along with the story. As well as Cameron, he's been out there telling coyote stories with me, this XʷlxWilt. And at the start, when he just learned that story, he was able to hold that cup, and then he was able to tell the story even easier. No. So this is some of my digital art, and let's see, the top is the Kootenai. I did say a Kootenai and then Salish at the bottom for all my relations. And so this gets into the ledger art, and I try to use a lot of like CSKT, nspsuppsm, like my tribal affiliation, like older photographs from like the early 1900s. And so a lot of them are from like Edward Curtis photos. And so he captured a lot of our local XʷlxWilt, which are still a lot of their descendants, in my community. So we still have a lot of their like great-grandchildren, that are still here, and like getting to recreate these old black and white photos, to me, is a way that, we keep them alive, we keep their stories going. And so it's a way of perpetuating our cultural knowledge and their own personal stories, their, like the tribal collective memory, so things that we've all experienced within our community. I try to focus on, things like that, and the different designs too, because a lot of families have specific designs, and depending on your tribe, they have like, differences between families, tribes, the colors that we use, even when beadwork came to be, like that's kind of a newer thing. The more traditional things to make designs was like using porcupine quills. But a lot of the same designs were still used, for the porcupine quills, and then later on with beadwork. And this is another piece of art that I did for Every Child Matters. And that's one of the indigenous issues that we have going on, where we're doing a lot of this excavation, a lot of this, I forgot what it's called, like echo, like seeing all the remains at these different boarding schools and residential schools throughout Canada and the United States. And we need to bring awareness to that, because even though it's a tough history, it's not a happy history sometimes from a lot of these boarding schools and this like tragic experiences, we still need to we need to continue to know the history, the real history of what happened, and being able to reconciliate with our different XʷlxWilt people, and making sure that we know what happened to our certain ancestors, because a lot of them went missing during those boarding schools. So anyway, I created this as an art piece to reflect that. And I took a lot of different older pictures of Salish and Blackfeet children, and I just kind of put them all together. So they were actually all separate, and then I just made them, into one big thing, because it's an issue that is still continuing on today. Like, we're still trying to find out how many remains are out there. And we also have this, open mission, and it's actually one of the things I was thinking about focusing on during my residency here, is creating a piece that I could take back to that mission church that will be like a reconciliation with our tribe, with our people, that is at least acknowledging what has happened there and the field of bones that's behind that church. Like, they need to acknowledge that, because right now it's just a field that nobody really knows about other than the community. And here's some more of my recent ledger art. And so I just did these ones like this past couple weeks, so during the residency. This one up here. I also put their names at the top, kind of in cursive. So this is Clara Rivas, and she's one of our Xʷlxʷilt, one of my relatives. And then this is Pascal Hammer, who's also Salish. That's a Nez Perce lady. And then this one, I think really reflects the Yaya relationship that we have on our res. There's a lot of grandparents that are raising their grandkids, and I think that's a great way to kind of capture that in their knowledge, because we have a lot of our elders and knowledge keepers that, they're the ones that have that direct tie to a lot of the ones that walked down the Bitterroot, a lot of these older ancestors and their stories. So getting our children together with different elders, one of them is Ipa Boyd, and we'll be doing a basket weaving project with her soon. And just having her around our children, getting to have those stories, that's where culture and our experiences really happens, because just being out there digging up Bitterroot, it's good, we're learning how to dig up a native plant. But if you don't have those elders and knowledge keepers there to talk about their experiences and the stories that they, their memories, then you're not able to get that proper enculturation of what we know, our indigenous knowledge. And I guess the other thing too that I like to mention is ledger art. Why I'm so interested in it is because I feel like it's one of the closer things to connecting to ancestors as far as art forms. A lot of our Xʷlxʷilt art, we didn't really have landscapes like we see in European art. And so having just the unique, the real knowledge that we need to know within our tribes, which is whose family is this? What design do we see? And so the facial expressions don't typically matter, and that's why you see them without facial features. A lot of it is spent on making sure that you're getting their beadwork, their hat, their war bonnet, or whatever it might be, that'll tell you, oh, that person's from the Nez Perce tribe, or this is a Xʷlxʷilt, Ayak. So I feel it's really giving us that true meaning of our identity as Salish people, the things that we need to know. What are the pieces of their outfit? What were they doing? Were they at a powwow? Were they at a ceremony? There's a lot that we could see in these old photos. I feel a lot of Edward Curtis photographs are kind of, what do you call it? Where they staged, I guess, where they're just stowed sked, but at least I feel they're wearing the unique regalia that was theirs. Whereas you could, see in some of those older photographs, they might have a Kiowa headband, and you're oh, they must have had that as a prop. So you really have to, identify, is that really Salish, or is that Xʷlxʷilt, or whatever it might be. But, even the paper, thinking about the time period, all of this is from the late 1800s. And that was a time where indigenous peoples didn't have a voice. They weren't able to talk their language. or practice their culture without, being murdered or being physically abused. And so it wasn't until 1978 with the Native American or Indian Religious Freedom Act that we were finally able to start talking our language and practicing culture freely. And so this paper, this was a time where boarding schools, this is the time of boarding schools where we weren't able to express ourselves. And so I feel like all of those old ledger books that they found, they were able to finally get some of that cultural knowledge, some of their language, the things that they were thinking, they were able to express that on these old ledger books that were found in like boarding schools. And even just like the ones that were in Carlisle Indian School, some of them were like made by chiefs and kind of more of the warriors, but at least it was something that was expressing themselves, their people, and their stories. And so taking all these older black and white photos, this is an example of this lady who is Clara Gravel and her twins. She's Xʷlxwɔilt Kootenai. And I wrote the year down in her dress, so 1922. That was when that photo was taken. And I'm bringing those old photos to life is what I feel like. Because a lot of them are black and white where they don't have the color, the color of the beadwork. So I'm really doing a lot of guessing on I bet it was this, based on looking at a lot of our older beadwork and the things that we see in some of the collections today. And so, sometimes I end up adding extra things. So her dress has all these floral patterns. And I looked up some of the material from back in the early 1920s, and I saw a lot of these floral designs, and so I kind of started going with that. But then I decided to, kind of start making up my own little pattern. So I made 3 variations, and it kind of looks similar to I think beadwork, and this one looks like a canvas. So I've just really wanted to continue working with that and coming up with new designs and designs that I see and trying to recreate a lot of the objects that we have that are no longer with the people that we need to revitalize and perpetuate. So and I guess just real quick, this is some of what I've been working on in the last couple of weeks here at the library. And so using that laser engraver, the picture over there, I have my bark basket, and that was from last fall. And that was the very first time that I used a machine, and that's actually the reason why I was so excited to try to get this art residency here at the library. And I don't even think this has ever really been done before, where we're using our traditional basket forms and then you're using something contemporary like the laser engraver. We've used those wood burners, but using this machine, we could put in our designs and just see it being created, and it's kind of a beautiful thing because it saves us time. It's a way of adapting, and our ancestors have done that forever. We always have this cultural adaptation where we have our traditional objects like our digging stick, but then instead of using the old horn antler and the stick, now there's metal ones, and it's actually even quicker. So we always adapt, and we also want to continue to use those traditional ones. So I think having a mix of both is very beautiful. So having these little cedar bark basket earrings, we were able to create this design on there using that laser engraver, and then I painted it. But yeah, those cedar bark basket earrings, Cameron decided to make them out of my scraps, so I have my bigger baskets. And it was a good way of having 0 waste, and we were able to do something beautiful with that still captures the form of those baskets. Shay and Cameron created this. I think this is your part, huh?
Oh, sure.
And so then she had.
This is just, this was part of how we've just been kind of working together. I'm really interested in the software side of these things and learning how to use my computer better. And so this was just part of one of Aspen's designs that we're working on, trying to carve into wood blocks with the CNC machine. So Yeah, that was great. I got to touch on a few things you said there because it's what I'm working on. So, this has been a really interesting experience, this residency program. I've never been an artist in residence before. I remember the first time I was introduced to open air was during COVID, and it was a meeting with Stoney and some of my students at the time at SKC, and it was just, I was sitting there taking just as many notes as my students were, I think, and I was, thinking like, I'd love to be an artist in residence someday, and it's just, things that we were always so busy all the time, and it's been so nice to be able to focus on ourselves as artists, like I mentioned earlier. So I've been able to do a lot of projects, and through starting with my master's degree program, I was in the Creative Pulse program here at the University of Montana, and I was really grateful for that program. They just, I feel like, opened up my creative mind in a way I never thought I would go in life artistically, and to accomplish projects I just never really thought I could do. I've been able to do a few public art projects, one that's in Polson at Riverside Park and on the bridge. So if you ever drive through Polson, you'll see on one side is a tile mosaic that's on the back of a bathroom wall, and that's the picture right here. I was able to work with students. I think I'm just an educator at heart. I like to teach others as much as I can. Even when I'm learning something, I try to teach along with it, and I'm always trying to involve people as much as possible in the process. I like that part of it. This tile mosaic mural involved over 100 other kids, like from Upward Bound and Boys and Girls Club, and like literally anybody would walk by the hallway at the art building and be like, hey, you want to make some tiles? Come on in. And I was really proud of that project. It set me off on this idea of a process where I just don't need to know what it's going to look like at the end. I kind of was always pretty thinking I had to know exactly what something was going to turn out like before I even started the project. And that was just, when I look back on that, it feels really silly. Where now I really love that mystery that comes out of a process and out of making art, going with the flow and and making a lot of mistakes along the way. Or for instance, this project required a lot of money, and I didn't have that money, and I also didn't know I was going to get the money, and it required paying people to help me accomplish the project. And I just kept going at it, and I kept chipping away at it, and I was finally able to raise enough money to fund that project. And that was my first sort of dip into writing grants and learning how to fund ideas that I have and places where I see potential for art projects. And so I was really proud of that. It was my first real dive into like a big project and thinking big and thinking sort of as a community and thinking about art in a specific place. This mural here is one that I completed last year at K. William Harvey in Ronan. I'm really proud of that mural. It's one of 4 that I did for the school district last year, and I was able to work with one of my former students. He came over, Josh Crowdy, and he came and helped me paint our mural together. And you can see some of the other ones that I was able to put in schools all over. So talking about sort of representation and trying to educate our kids, I wanted to make murals that they could see themselves in, and that I could sort of make a difference in a space. And so all this kind of stuff was like the biggest projects of my life, and they were really difficult, but I kind of say this, creating something 3-dimensionally on the computer using the software has been like hands down the hardest thing I've ever done. I spent sort of hours after Taylor showed us how to use the 3D printer and talked about some of the softwares that I would need to use. I spent hours on YouTube, like 9 hours of tutorials on like how to make something on this screen, and I was like clicking around, so many clicks, and like 9 hours later it was like, behold, I made a rectangle, I did it. No, I didn't like call you over. I was like, come look at this, I made it. Yeah, it's 3-dimensional. I've been really super excited about this process. Like I guess I get to talk about being like before computers, or before like what we have now. I guess I tell my kids all the time about before the internet and before phones and before. I just remember like my dad's little like green Mac that he would type on, and it was just a huge deal that you could type and it would be a letter on the screen. And to me as a kid, that was amazing. We used to dream about like being able to talk to people on your watch and stuff like that. That's where I'm at this point in my life, and it feels really weird to talk about it that way, but it's the way things are going with technology and how fast everything's moved. I feel really grateful to sort of witnessed a lot of this and to find myself in a place where I'm trying to interact with it and keep up as well. And so I was really proud of this rectangle, I have to say. It was just like, it was like, I don't know, this is beautiful, it's so beautiful. And I was just laughing at this whole process. When I worked at the Missoula Art Museum, I got introduced to an artist, Todd Forsgren, and I remember his exhibition and I really loved it. It was just, he had just sort of this eclectic mix of photographs that were like wild experiments, and it was, there was one on display where he's on a Mac, and it's just a recording of a little arrow kind of moving around the screen, and he's taking an Ansel Adams photograph on Photoshop and trying to match the ridgeline of the mountain in the photograph with the histogram, like trying to match them, just as sort of an arbitrary, like trying to make them match together. And he said in the end he kind of ruined both of them. And I always thought that was really hilarious to me. I spent a lot of time with that piece, just watching him click around on the computer, and I was thinking of something just as silly. Like once I had this slab, I made it because I wanted to try to fold it like a real cedar bark basket. We'd spent so much of the last couple of years working on these baskets together, and there's a point in the process where you're peeling the bark and you fold it and you're getting ready to sew it. And so I was like, I'm gonna make this happen. I'm gonna make a cedar bark basket on this program. And so like another few hours later, I learned how to make a bend. And then it was like, okay, how do I make it go a little farther? And that took lots of Googling, lots of looking and asking questions and trying to figure out even what the question is to ask, because I don't know a lot of technical terms, and I've never let that hold me back, I guess, but it helps to know like I couldn't even tell you what they are, the chamfer and there's a lot of stuff going on here that I don't know because I'm not an engineer. So it was really hard to figure out how do I take that section of it and turn it this way. And I just feel so like amateur at this thing. When I thought I was pretty good at computers, I felt like I was pretty good at knowing what to do. And so this was finally like, glory, I made it. I made the basket bend. That's as far as I could get it though. And it took about most of the week, I have to say. No, I'm just kidding. It took a few nights, and was just really thinking about this digital world and the real world and the interaction between those two things. Hard to put words to it, but just thinking how silly it is for me to be making this basket on a computer when I have the bark and there's trees outside, and we know how to do this, but it's trying to create that like digital space. I imagine teaching kids this type of things. Our kids are watching us over our shoulders as we're on our computers, and I'm sure that this will be like really, I don't know, I hope it influences them as they get older, and so I was able to start figuring this program out and started getting a little bit more complicated each time and was thinking of different ideas. So this was one where I was trying to think about improving tools, and I felt kind of arrogant for doing that because it's like a fish trap was developed over like thousands of years to be like really efficient, to put in the water and to catch fish. And I was like, maybe I can make it better, with a computer program I don't know how to use. And but I was trying to think, I was sitting there making one at my desk. I had all these different sticks, and I was trying to sew one together, and it was not easy at all. And so I was trying to think, like, could I make a product? Could I make a thing that would make this easier? Because this was my first attempt at like making the ring at the front of a fish trap. I have a drawing of one at the end. I should have put what a real fish trap looks like if you haven't seen it, but it's basically like a big cone, and the sticks allow water to go through, the fish go through the front, and there's a little, another cone inside, and they swim in and they can't swim out. And so I was trying to make this interact with like natural things, so the plastic and then this stick together. Again, one of those moments where it's like, cool, or my kids are like, that's really cool, and I'm like, this is amazing, look at this, it's a natural stick, and I made this other thing with electricity and a computer, and just every part of this process has been really sort of eye-opening to me and amazing to me every time, it feels like. And I was thinking about arrowheads. I'm doing a project in Polson right now. I'm working on a big arrowhead and to put on the ground, thinking about sort of time and a lot of people still find arrowheads on the lake, and it just goes to show like how important that place was and survival, and it makes me think of all kinds of different things. So this was I was like, I'm gonna make an arrowhead, because I watched a lot of my great teachers that I had, people who knew how to flint knap, do it, and I haven't really learned it yet. It's really hard to do. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna 3D print one and make one out of plastic. And this was just, again, that whole, like, I really try not to give up. I do my best to keep looking for answers and pushing sort of what I know. And so that was like the first one on the left. And then I figured out how to make some angles happen here, you know, and this probably feels really amateur, but I was really amazed at myself in front of my computer. And then what I thought was really funny was, as I'm thinking about survival and technology, is that I was trying to wave this mouse around, is that like I was fighting this all with a little arrowhead already, like the little clicker that we have on the computer. I was just thinking, like, that's my arrowhead. I'm trying to hunt this stuff down with and make it work. So I'm looking forward to printing these. I think they'll be interesting. I've really enjoyed using the 3D scanner. So after I kind of gave up on trying to make that rectangle bend more and try to figure out how to tie and put holes in it and all this kind of stuff. This is a miniature one that I was able to scan, and I was pretty proud of how the scan turned out. I couldn't figure out how to hollow it out yet, but what's really cool is I can take this miniature one and then I can blow it up larger to like a bigger size. So it's funny that I don't know, there's something about scale here that I'm really enjoying too, where I can take something just tiny and make it larger. I also was just sort of moments in this whole process of working on the computer, like noticing the arrowhead that I've used forever as the clicker, and then seeing it in just a different way. I was thinking about this thing that popped up to me while I was making this basket. It's this old form. It's this one that I think is really beautiful. And it says up top, it says, changes may be lost, unsaved or saved. And I just thought that was kind of poetic. It's this thing that we are trying to save, and am I saving it by doing it on a computer, or are we better served like being out in the woods and making real ones? I don't know, just stuff that crossed my mind as I was doing this project. I'm always inspired by my Navajo, my wife, and the things that she teaches me and that we go do. And I'll tell you about, I guess, the project part that I'm most proud of so far is the Petsa handle. So a Petsa is a digging stick for digging bitterroot, and you can see it right here in Aspen's arm there, and then that's the bitterroot. Again, thinking about sustenance and survival and time. This is a handle that she hasn't finished yet, where it doesn't have a hole drilled in it. The hole's drilled through, and then you're able to put a sharpened stick that you can get underground with, and it's kind of an ingenious design because the stick, it can be sharpened on both sides and it can be taken out. So when it's dull, you can turn it over and put the handle back on. And so we had this bone, and it just got me thinking about the scanner and things that we could do. And so we scanned it, and I wanted to use the program itself to put the hole through, just to test myself, I suppose, and to take this piece further without actually doing anything to it. And so this was the printout. And you're welcome to come pick it up here and feel it. It's pretty satisfying, as my kids would say, very satisfying. The small one, this was the initial one I had, it broke. It's the kids, I'm gonna blame the kids on that one too. I don't know what, I just found it on the ground. But I was just planning on bringing the small piece, and then Taylor printed for me the large one, and I was super excited. That was like that moment where like I want to make more, because it was just, it turned out better than I thought it was going to. And to bring like interesting colors to it and sort of new stuff makes me really proud of it. So here's more of that process. And just again, this machine that just really kind of blows my mind as far as the possibilities, and I've been just really overwhelmed in this whole process, kind of thinking about that I could pretty much make whatever I set my mind to, as long as I can kind of figure out how to get there and describe and make it happen, I guess. It's a really satisfying part of this process. So we still have a couple more weeks, and I'm thinking, I just worked on this last night. This was in the news. I've been kind of a news junkie lately. I've just been watching a lot of news, and this was in it. It was the Einstein tile. Somebody discovered a new shape. They discovered a shape that when you put the tiles together, ultimately it like never repeats. There are patterns in it, and you'll see patterns, but if they were to cover like the whole floor with this tile, it will never repeat itself, really. It's just an interesting 13-sided shape that was just recently found. It just, I kind of felt like shapes were covered, you know, but we're still finding new ones. And so I don't know what to do with that, but I made it. I made it on my file here. Oh, I guess I didn't put a picture of it. Likely story. But here's all the projects on the side, I guess, other things that we're working on, the arrowhead and the bark, and I tried to make a pet set, and it just looks like a stick. But I'm excited to see maybe what comes of this tile, so to print that out, and maybe even use the cutting tool to cut through bark, and use that nice, precise tool. I feel like I put in my time cutting in stencils with like X-Acto knives. I'm kind of over that at this point in my life, and so if the laser engraver can do that, then I'm excited to put that to work. And then finally, I've been doing a lot of painting, or working towards making more paintings. This is a painting I did with pigments that I made. I found them in our yard, and I crushed them all up, and I made my own drawing charcoal, and I made this painting. And I've been doing this a lot in some of the work where it's just sort of seeing half of the animal, and you know, it's kind of going off of the composition and coming back in other places. And so I want to do something like that, like in 3D. I guess when I think about painting like that, it comes out pretty two-dimensional, but I'm thinking about something that's three-dimensional, and so I'm excited that I can actually make something three-dimensional and try to collage it together and do something interesting with it. I don't know what it looks like though, so stay tuned. It's only been a week, like a week and a half, so it's been great, and I really just love getting to dive into process and see where it takes us. So thanks for listening, and let me know if you have any questions. Which one? This picture. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really even say what I'm planning on doing for the rest of my art for this project. So I started on this, and this is going to be a cuff. So it's a piece of cedar bark that we got for like making our baskets, and I cut it in half, but I'm making it so it fits around my wrist. And I don't think I've never seen a cedar bark cuff that was like a full slab cuff. It's usually like a woven one, like this one over here. But I was thinking about making it into the shape where it's gonna, you know, dry, where it has at least a gap that I could then put on my wrist. What I'm planning on doing is maybe putting some of our pitch glue, it's like a charcoal pitch glue, along the edges, because that's like where it typically starts to crack, and then it'll crack all the way down, you know, or off to the edge. So I think if I put that black pitch glue on, and then I'm gonna put some like buckskin around it, and kind of do what we do with our parfleche. So there's a lot of like parfleche cuffs and bags that we end up putting like a material along the edge, so it's not so sharp. But I'm planning on trying out some buckskin, adding the holes, maybe using that the tool down there to poke the holes for me, and then I'm gonna stitch it up and then make these cuffs. I still need to add the rest of my floral designs and then add some paint to that. And so this is just something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, is to have like a full set of cedar, because cedar for Salish people is a really vital, important part of our culture. It's like our life way, one of the most significant trees for our people. And then the other thing that I'm planning on doing is using the Xʷlxŭwilt and going back to place. We want to hike up to like Mount Jumbo or one of these places around Missoula and go back and dig some bitterroot up and use that to 3D print some Xʷlxŭwilt and create an art piece using, you know, some of our roots that we end up cleaning. Xʷlxŭwilt. And my grandma and great aunt, they actually used to go out by like the fairgrounds or the airport, and they used to go dig bitterroot with their mom and with like this lady who Cameron did that mural of, which is Sophie Moise. You know, her and my great-grandma, they used to go out together and dig these plants. But then because of all this development, you know, we're not able to get that same kind of experience. So we want to go out and find that speculum that's still here, dig it up, and, you know, just use our seasonal time. Like, the bitterroot's on my mind right now. It's the thing that we need to go gather. And so I want to focus even my art on the speculum. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about, you know, even my childhood, thinking that I was able to meet two women that walked out of the Bitterroot Valley during that removal, the Trail of Tears for the Salish people. And when I was like 8, 9, I didn't really think it was that important. I was like, oh, cool. But then now I'm like, wow, that was crazy that I actually knew these ladies when I was younger. And they were the ones that lived in the Bitterroot Valley, got to experience the seasonal changes, and they were living on a reservation, and one of them lived until she was 107 years old. So she lived like as long as our lead powwow, like every single year. It was like the same anniversary as like how old she was. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say. So we're gonna be doing some speculum and probably using Cameron's petza, plastic petza as part of that project too. So yeah, we'll see our work in the next couple of weeks should come to life. So not much stress. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a little time for a few questions if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
What did you color your ledger drawings with?
Let's see, yeah, I usually use colored pencils, so that's like a lot of the colors that I use, and then I use, I forget what it's called, the ink pens to usually do like the design, the outline of it. And then with ledger art, usually you have like a darker outline, and then the inner color is like a lighter version of that. So for the skin tones, like there's those 2 tones, and then even beadwork, you see a lot of like the darker outline, and then the lighter you know, inner part. And then I also use the artist art loft markers. So I really like those because, you know, it shows up like really bright and vibrant.
What was something that each of you discovered that was surprising in working with this new art technology for your practices?
Yeah, you answered that, but I would say just like the space, which I guess Cameron could talk more about this, but like having it in this virtual space is really weird because I guess in our community, a lot of things that are like culturally sensitive, or, you know, a lot of our culture, you know, it's like stuff that's for the community, for our people. And so to have it out there like that, where it's usually that sensitive kind of like information that you only teach to, you know, kids in our community, things like that. It's interesting that it's just kind of out there now, but I know that a lot of our youth are on their phones, you know, they're not out there with us as much. So I think it's a way that we're going to be able to teach them and preserve it. I'll let Cameron.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I discovered was that I can do this. I didn't think that this was ever possible. The library makes this possible. I just think that that's the best part of this. I guess it's accessible to me now. I really would have never been able to do this if there wasn't a makerspace, and that, or that it was even like somebody to say, this is how you go through this, and here's what to do. Like that's a big deal. You know, I don't think I would have been able to get this far working on this without this space and this help and people here and the access to it. It just is, to me, as I'm thinking about this, I have to remember that we're in our artist residency. I'm thinking about our art, but I'm also, my educator brain is already saying like, here's how we're gonna involve kids, and we're gonna get our kids to come see this stuff and to use it. And so just the accessibility, I guess, is probably to be the greatest part of what I've discovered. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's a good question.
Question?
Are you using
virtual reality headset to explore Google Earth and native sites while you're here?
I haven't done that yet, no. That needs to be done for sure, yeah.
Isn't there like a guy you follow on YouTube that does stuff like where he has his drone and finds all these old...
Oh, sure, yeah.
That
Definitely like to play with Google Earth. I just introduced our kids to that. They're always trying to find stuff on our computer. But yeah, I think that sounds amazing. I haven't tried the virtual reality stuff yet. This has been pretty consuming. I think it's a lot like printmaking. Printmaking is so much prep. It's like having to cut stencils and get things, you know, prepared ahead of mixing inks, and there's always like, it's a lot of work leading up to like pulling it off the press to me, and this reminds me a lot of that process where it's so much sort of gathering of things that we know and trying to get files ready to be able to print or to, there's a lot of work that goes behind that. That's what I've discovered too the most, is it takes a lot to get it to that printer.
Or our natural materials to go out and gather them.
Yeah,
A lot of effort.
measuring things in millimeters also is really different, or knowing what that is. I mean, millimeter means nothing to me. Now I know. I bought like a measuring device that allows us to go measure things in millimeters, and that's been kind of making me look really close at things. And so Google Earth, the virtual reality, yeah, we haven't even gotten to that point yet, for sure. So, awesome.
We have time for one more. Anybody else?
Questions?
I mean, I'm curious about just it's such the worlds of technology and natural materials, like from the earth, that you're so connected to. Like the collision of those two worlds to me is a really interesting place.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I just wonder if you can speak to that part of the experience. Like what you've shared so far is kind of like, oh, you know, a utility to it. Like, oh, there's this freeing aspect. Like you don't have to use your hands for everything. And yet, to make art in Salish is to do something good with your hands. What is that overlap on the Venn diagram look like for you guys? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I've been putting a lot of this out on my like Facebook, which really reaches a lot of like community members, you know, back home. And once they saw Cameron's pizza, I think they all really loved the color. Like, it's so vibrant, and we have, you know, that color in our berries and in our beadwork and our regalia, you know. So I think that just seeing something that's so valuable and important for our culture in this like vibrant new form, it's kind of interesting and fun, I think, you know. And even with my like Salesian language map that I created in my master's degree, I put that out for you know, my friends from different Salesian bands to then share, and then, you know, getting their feedback. And a lot of that was kind of like this colorful looking map that was kind of like an art piece on its own. And instead of focusing on our reservation, which a lot of linguists end up doing, where they're like, they live on the Flathead Indian Reservation, instead I tried to get our Aboriginal territories. And so instead of having this like bold border between the territories, it was just a soft color overlay to show like this is where we traveled seasonally. So I feel like, you know, all these art forms, it's a beautiful representation of who we are as XＷlxWilt people. So I think in a lot of ways, as long as it's not too culturally sensitive, those kinds of things, like, you know, we don't like to put out there, but if it's something that's not sensitive, then we're able to just put it out there and get our Indigenous voices out there in the art community and in the digital world. So yeah, in a lot of ways, we're still doing the working with our hands, because we have to sit there and do all of the gathering of the materials, all of the digital work with our hands before it gets printed. So I feel like we're still doing it, you know. Do you want to answer that too?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that while I was making the handle, because these are like some heirlooms that can be passed down, and I was like, what am I going to pass this file down to my kids? Like, here's my, you know, it felt silly making it. Honestly, like it feels so far outside of what we would make that for, and but I think a lot about adaptation and tribal people, and there's a long history of adaptation to the world as it is and as it changes, and so I think I love the idea of just trying to push into a new space that not a lot of Indigenous people are in, I guess, and especially where we're at. I know that there's actually some of these machines around some of our schools in the area, and I'm looking forward to like pushing that more. I think technology is just really important to learn, and I think kids will probably pick this up faster than it's like picking up in my brain, and just I'm excited for that possibility, that empowerment that you can make what you dream, I guess, and yeah.
Just a comment, I'm really appreciative of this new way of looking at it and doing your traditional art, and I appreciate that a lot of families will not have heirlooms to pass on, and yet a reproduction allows those children who don't have access to that to access it and to see, hey, it's not traditional, but this is like what our ancestors used, and I like the idea of teaching to it that way, especially if this generation went, cool, computerized, you know.
Yeah, sure. I agree. I think it's just it just holds a lot of knowledge. It has a lot to teach, and so it feels good to be able to through something made on a 3D printer still teach something that's like historical, traditional, and yeah, I'm excited. We're working on some fleshing tools. I've been scraping a lot of hides lately, and so we're going to copy one of Aspen's deer bone fleshing tools. And I'm excited to make like a really colorful set. I don't know. I like all the colors that you could. As I've been looking and trying to make my own pigments, I pretty much have a pretty small range of what I've been able to find between like browns and reds and lots of greens, lots of browns, and then so I like all the color options that are there for the different types of plastics. And I was also glad to hear that some of the plastic that we're using is biodegradable, so it's not. That's also the other side of this too, is just making something that's, I don't know, I don't want to make junk. I don't want to make something that's like more plastic in the world, I guess, but I think when we put that power to it, it elevates it a little bit, you know, to be able to teach with and for people to admire. So hopefully it's not just junk, I guess. Yeah.
Great.
Any questions?